Welcome to another session of the Whiteboard series. Today we'll be looking at Practice Paper 2 Booklet A. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So before I start, I'd like to remind everyone that whenever you're attempting questions, be it Booklet A or Booklet B questions, it's always good to try to identify the topic and then the concept of the topic that you are looking at. So for the very first question, we are looking at the topic on classification of living things, and in this case, in particularly, a bird nest fern. So we have a flow chart over here, and we should go down with the arrows. Alright, so this question is testing you whether or not you're familiar with the characteristics associated with a non-flowering plant such as a bird nest fern. So the first question asked is it a plant? So obviously we know that a bird nest fern is green, it's a plant, so it cannot be no. The answer is yes, so we can cross out A. So and then we head on over to the next question. Does it have flowers? We know that it's a non-flowering plant, so answer is no. We cross out B. And then we go on to, does it reproduce by spore? Yes, it does. Alright, so the answer would be C, answer 3. Moving on to the second question. Now this question is on life cycles. Very obvious. We have two life cycles here. Now the table below describes the life cycles of animal P and Q. So we have P here, which is the mosquito, and we have Q here, which is the dragonfly. So the first question in A asked, does it have wings in the adult stage? So if you look at both animal P and Q, they both have wings in the adult stage. So the answer should be yes and yes, which is correct for option A. B, are the parts of the life cycle found in water? Alright, so as you can see once again in animal Q, alright, these two stages are in water, the young, and these two stages, the larvae and the pupa, is also in the water. So once again, it's a yes and yes. So B is also correct. Now for C, does it resemble its parents when it's young? Now from the two diagrams, you can clearly see that for both animal P and Q, the young does not resemble their adults. So the answer should be both no. However, for animal animal P, it is a yes. So therefore this is wrong and this is correct. And that rules out C, leaving us with the answer A and B. So option number 2. Moving on to question number 3. The diagram below shows the reproductive systems of a plant and a human respectively. So the question is asking which part E, F, G or H of the plant reproductive system performs a similar function to part J of the human reproductive system. So to answer this question, the first thing we need to do is we need to first identify part J and know exactly what are we dealing with. So J is actually your testis. Alright, and the function of the testis is to produce the male sex cells, also known as your sperms for the human. And in your plant, the structure that performs a similar structure would be G. This is known as your anther, okay, whereby you can find your pollen grains. And in your pollen grains, you will find your male sex cells. Alright, so just to revise very quickly on a few structures, H is the stigma, where your pollen grain is supposed to go during pollination. So very straightforward, this answer will be G. Question number 4. Another question on life stages or life cycle of plant. Now in this question, they are asking you which parts of the life cycle A, B or C would pollination, fertilization, germination takes place. Now germination is something to do with the seed, right? So before you get a young plant, you have germination. So obviously A, I'm going to say is germination right off from the start. And then you have pollination and fertilization. Now these two can only occur when you have an adult plant. Now I just want to be clear, pollination is a different process from fertilization. Pollination talks about how your pollen grains are being transferred from your anther to your stigma. I'm just going to very quickly write it down. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma, whereas your fertilization talks about the fuse. When your the fusion of your male and female sex cells. So when your male and female sex cells fuse together, that is known as fertilization. So these two are actually two very different processes altogether. However, they all require a mature plant. In this case, that would be known as an adult plant. So obviously, it has to take place after you get your adult plant stage, but before you get your seed, because all this, your seed only happens after fertilization has happened. So I'm going to say that for both this process and this process, they will happen at stage C. So the only one that actually tallies with this would be option number 4. So therefore your answer is 4. Moving on to question 5. Tim accidentally locked himself in a little cupboard when he was playing hide and seek. As there were no openings in the cupboard, air could not enter or leave the cupboard. The table below shows the change in percentage of gas X in the cupboard just before Tim was set free by his parents. Now, one look at it, I see percentage of gas X in the air. This question signals to me with these words that it's going to be a question on respiratory system. Alright, it's got to do with composition of air and respiration. So before Tim was trapped in, you know that it's 21%. So this tallies with the composition of air that we know as, or the type of gas that we know that is oxygen in the atmosphere. So we have to know what are the rough percentages of certain important gases. Now, what are the percentages? In oxygen, in normal atmospheric pressure, it's 21%. Your nitrogen is 78%. Your carbon dioxide is about 0.03%. And your water vapor varies. Varies meaning that it differs in different region. Why? Because certain region could be more humid, like Singapore, we are an island. Other countries could be more dry, for example, where areas like the desert, or even different seasons, winter time, summertime, springtime, it could actually affect the amount of water vapor that is found naturally in the air. So you will need to actually memorize these percentages in order to help yourself. Now, let's take a dive into this question. So right off the bat, because I already memorized this percentage of air, the composition of air in percentages, I know that it's oxygen. But to confirm it, I need to be able to rationalize out why is there a decrease. So we all remember that because Tim is trapped in a cupboard, we assume that the gases has minimal chance of escaping. So because of that, your oxygen, there will be a decrease because it is used for this process, known as respiration. So when you respire, you actually take in oxygen and then you give out carbon dioxide, right? In a process where you would release energy. So answer 1. Moving on to question number 6. Alright, this is actually a very straightforward question whereby they already give you the hint, circulatory system. Alright, they're going to compare and contrast between a circulatory system of a human versus a fish. So the question asks, which blood vessels of the human and fish carry blood rich in carbon dioxide? Now, to answer this question, whenever you're doing this kind of question where they talk about composition of gases, there are 2 gases that are most actively in play. Actually 3. So I will tell it to you now. So the 3 most important gases that you need to understand would be oxygen, carbon dioxide, and the last one would be nitrogen. you have to understand that oxygen typically is used up for respiration. This is something that is very important. And carbon dioxide is produced during respiration, whereas nitrogen remains unchanged because it is not used or produced by the body, so it would just remain status quo, unchanged. All right, so where does respiration take place? Let's do a very quick recap here. Now, respiration takes place in all living organisms. So every single cell is known as the basic living unit of life, or basic units of life, which means that it's a living thing. So respiration will actually take place in every single cell. So if you take a look at it, okay, identify a few things. If you ask me, the first thing I will always identify, all right, are my lungs. Okay, in the circulatory system of a human, because the blood leading out of the lungs, in this case is A, would be the highest amount of oxygen, because this is where my lungs have actually carried out gaseous exchange, where oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is given out. So any blood that is exiting my lungs at this time immediately will have the highest amount of oxygen and lowest amount of carbon dioxide. Conversely, any blood that is entering the lungs, in this case would be C, would have the highest amount of carbon dioxide and lowest amount of oxygen. This is because if we were to backtrack, okay, this blood actually came from all other parts of the body. So our other parts of the body signals that, okay, there are cells, okay? These cells would have taken up all the oxygen to use it for respiration. And in return, when you respire, you produce loads of carbon dioxide, which is taken up by the blood and transferred to the heart before going to the lungs to be removed. So I would say that C, all right, is rich in carbon dioxide, so is D. This too is actually rich in carbon dioxide, all right? And then, so I'm just going to indicate here with highlighter so that we know that this too is rich in carbon dioxide for a human. Now let's take a look at this for a fish. So for a fish, same thing, an organ that that carries out similar function to the lungs would be your gills. So any blood that comes right out of the gills, all right, would be rich in oxygen and poor in carbon dioxide, which is not what we're looking for in this question. Similarly, any blood coming out of other parts of the body would be rich in carbon dioxide and poor in oxygen, because all the oxygen is being used up for respiration, and in return lots of carbon dioxide has been produced. So therefore G and F would be rich in carbon dioxide and poor in oxygen. So looking at this fact, we can go ahead and highlight both F and G. So therefore that brings us to the answer of number 4, whereby C, D, E, F, G, these 4 are rich in carbon dioxide. So if the question is going to flip and ask you which is rich in oxygen, you can use the same method to rationalize and then get your answers. All right, moving on. Okay, so 3 students, Anne, Beth, and Carl, make the following observations about different human systems. All right, and then the question asks, which of the following shows the correct systems mentioned by the students? So what are the hints? What did N say? System A helps in the exchange of gases in our body. So right off from the start, exchange of gases. I already know that this has to be respiration, because that's the one that helps with gaseous exchange and nothing else. So just by that, and looking at it, I already know that I can eliminate a few options. So system A cannot be digestive because it does not help with gaseous exchange, and I've identified the respiratory system, so I can cross this out. It is not the circulatory system, because the circulatory system helps with delivering items around the body. I can cross it out. It is the circulatory system, and it's not the circulatory system. So basically, I have identified my answer is option 3. However, I want to make sure that it's true, so I'm going to cross-check for the remaining ones. So Beth said that system B helps to break food into simpler substance in our body. That will be our digestive system, which is absolutely true. And Carl said system C helps to transport. So you know your circulatory system deals with transport, and there you have it. Bingo. The answer is number 3. So what I've done here is I've shown you how to use the elimination method to both confirm our answer and to save time. Now in question 8, study the cell shown in diagram below. What's the main function of P? Now for questions on cells, it is very important to remember that you need to memorize the functions and how to identify the different structure of the cells. There is no other way around it. It's just pure memory work. Alright, without that, you will not be able to answer even the higher level questions. So for this, is actually a very low level 1 question, which is just asking you out of memory, what is P and what's its function? So P is basically the nucleus, and its function is basically to control all activities in the cell. So obviously, we have the other structures, which I'm going to very quickly identify for you. Just in case you didn't have a chance, just a quick refresher. So the line on the very outside, the outermost one is your cell wall. And the function of the cell wall is basically to control substances entering or leaving the cell. The second line is actually your cell membrane. Oh, my apologies. I've said something wrongly. Can we backtrack a bit? Your cell wall, let me start again. Basically, it helps to prevent any injury to your plant and gives your plant cell a regular shape. Alright, so once again, your cell wall prevents injury to your plant cell and at the same time gives your cell a regular fixed shape. Okay, the second one, which I want to show you, which is this line over here, the innermost one, is in fact your cell membrane, which controls the substances entering and leaving your cells. Okay, my apologies. Then after that, you have your chloroplast, which contains your chlorophyll. Now your chlorophyll traps sunlight, alright, to carry out this process known as photosynthesis. Then you have this space here. This is called your cytoplasm. So your cytoplasm is basically a jelly-like substance where all chemical activities or all cellular activities happens in there. Then you have your vacuole. And last but not least, of course, this is your nucleus. Alright, so that was a very quick refresh on labeling and identifying the structures of your plant cell. So you can think of your vacuole like a sort of like a storehouse whereby it stores all the excess food, alright? Excess food, excess nutrients, okay, and water. Now, moving on to question 9. Which of the following statement is correct? Compare cell A and B, basically. So only cell B is able to make food. This is obviously wrong because it's lacking chloroplast. Only cell A can control cell activities. This is actually wrong as well because as we can see, both cell B and cell A contains your cell nucleus. Both cell A and B have fixed shape. This is also wrong. As we can see that only your cell A has the cell wall over here, whereby it actually gives it a fixed regular shape. Only cell A contains chloroplast and can make food. Yes. And if you don't know, these are your chloroplasts. So answer is number 4. Very straightforward. Moving on to question 10. Now, the plant below was left in an open field under the sun for 3 days. Okay. At the end of 3 days, they said that plants PQR were tested for starch by adding iodine to them. So this is a test about starch test. So this chapter falls under plant nutrition. All right. So let's take a look at it. It has got to do with some, at least something to do with photosynthesis wherever you have plant nutrition. So let's jump right in. So they ask which leaves will contain starch, right? So you have leaf P, R, okay, and then you have Q. So to answer this question, I always tell my students that whenever you have a nutrition and plants question, in fact, I always tell them, you know what? In the exam, you are going to get at least 1 or 2 questions on it, if not more. Please write down the word equation for photosynthesis, and that will help you a great deal. So I am going to write it down for you now, just once in this whole paper. So, and we can use it as a reference. So in order for photosynthesis to take place, you will first need carbon dioxide together with water, and then arrow in the presence of light together with chlorophyll. Sorry, misspelled the chlorophyll, going to make the correction. And then the process will give you glucose with oxygen. So this is actually a fabulous word equation whereby you can use to answer a lot of questions that's got to do with nutrition in plants, even in booklet B. So I highly strongly suggest that you memorize this together with the word equation for respiration, write it somewhere in your booklet, and then after that you can use it as a reference. All right. Now, so basically, if you take a look at this question, it's asking you which of this actually managed to photosynthesize. Why? Because you're testing for starch over here. So starch indicates the presence of, starch actually tells you that photosynthesis has occurred. So we take a look at these 4 leaves. All right, so let's start off with leaf P. So all surfaces were not covered. So obviously in photosynthesis, you need carbon dioxide. You also need light together with chlorophyll. So no issue. This leaf P has got everything covered. It would be able to undergo photosynthesis. So yes, let's put a tick there to indicate that you will find starch on it. And then after that, let's look at R. R is wrapped in a clear plastic bag with liquid to absorb oxygen. Now in photosynthesis, you do not need oxygen. In fact, you produce oxygen. So this liquid over here, which is going to absorb oxygen, will have no effect on photosynthesis. Photosynthesis can still take place because it's wrapped in clear plastic bag. Light can still enter, no issue. You have light, you have water, which comes from the roots, and you have carbon dioxide. So yes, go ahead and to put a tick there. Now let's take a look at leaf Q. Now Q is wrapped in a black plastic bag. So therefore, in a black plastic bag, light is not permitted to reach the leaves. Photosynthesis would not occur, and you will not get any starch. So therefore, the answer will be P and R, answer 2. Moving on to question 11. Thomas wanted to conduct an experiment to find out if the color of light will affect the rate of photosynthesis on a rose plant. So which of the variables should he change in the setup of the experiment to ensure a fair test? So in experiments, we are very concerned about conducting a fair test, and the golden rule is that there should only be one change variable. Now this change variable needs to be the variable that you are trying to investigate. So in this case, he is trying to find out if the color of the light. So in this case, there is only one thing that to be changed, and in this case, that would be number 1, color of the light. Very straightforward, and everything else needs to be kept constant. Moving on to question 12. Okay, a food chain linking organism K, L, M, and N is shown below. Alright, so when there's a decrease in the population of a K, which of the following shows that what will happen to the rest of the other organisms? So once again, just a very quick recap. A food chain basically shows you, all right, the feeding relationship between the animals. Okay, what is the feeding relationship? I'm just going to pen it down. It also shows you the direction of energy transfer. How energy is being transferred, okay, from one organism to another. Which organism? So the animal that is in question in this question was K. All right, they want to know if K decreases, what would happen to the rest? So because K feeds on M technically should actually increase, right? Because now you have one less consumer of M, so M population will go up. So L, however, will actually have less of K to eat, so L would actually decrease as well, right? Okay, now if L decreases, think about it. Since N feeds on L, N would also decrease because now there's a lower population of L. So given of such a situation, the answer would be number 3, whereby M will increase because K has decreased to feed it. So because there's a lower population number of K, L has lesser K to feed on, so L is running out of food, L will decrease, and because L decreases, N will also decrease. So can you see it's kind of like a domino effect over here. Question number 13. Study the food web below. Okay, so let me do a very quick recap. The difference between food web and food chain is that food web are made of multiple food chain, and this food web is present because in reality, animals don't just have one choice of food. Just like you and I can choose to eat a salad or I can choose to eat a hamburger, right? So having just one food chain would mean that I can only eat salad for the rest of my life, if you're going to say that, but that's not real, okay? So a food web is actually much more accurate in reflecting the choices that in the authenticity of feeding relationship in a natural setting, all right? So based on the food web, which statement is correct? Let's jump right into it. So organisms C and D are the only predators and not prey. So let's C and D. C is here and D is here. So this is not true because as you can see, C is eaten by D. So straight away we know that C is prey to D. So therefore we can go right out and cancel one out. 2. There are a total of 3 food chains that end with organism E. How do we do this? We backtrack. So we take a look at E as the final endpoint. So if we look at it, there is only 2 arrows coming towards E. So we know that the answer should be 2 and not 3. So as you can see, when we backtrack it, it looks like this. This is 1 and this is 2. So once again, we can X out 2. Let's look at 3. An increase in organism A will lead to an increase in organism E. This is plausible because EA, if you take a look here, is the producer, right? It probably is a plant which is eaten by C. So if C gets more food, which is A, C population will go up. So if C population goes up, E will have more food because since E feeds on C. And not only that, if you take a look at it, A is also fed by B, which is also eaten by D, which is also eaten by E. So generally, A is the producer. If A goes up, everything goes up because there are more food. But let's check to see if there's a conflict. Alright, for 4. If a disease wiped out organism B, only A, C, and D will be affected. Okay, that's not true. Why? Because if you take a look at it, B is eaten by D and D is eaten by E. So if B gets wiped out, D population would decrease, which would lead to a decrease in population E as well, since E feeds on D. So this is also wrong. So therefore, I'm very certain that the answer is number 3. Moving on to question 14. The diagram shows how water and food are transported to different parts of plant, T and U and V. Which of the following correctly shows the path of the plant? Okay, now first things first, alright, we have to understand that water would come from the stem. That is something that we need to, water would come from the roots, and this is something that we need to understand, and it travels from ground and then upwards to the leaves in a unidirectional manner. Okay, so water is actually one of the easiest to identify when it comes to the parts of it. Okay, so looking at it, we first find out where does water originate from. So if you look at it, water actually comes from T, right? It originates from here before it splits and go in a different pathway. So we know that T for sure is going to be our roots. And that's one tip I can tell you for identifying the different parts of the plants when it comes to transporting different substances. Look out for your water. So with that in mind, I can straight away rule out certain things. So let's take a look at T. T has to be the roots, right? So if we look at the first column over here, okay, leaves is wrong, number 2 is wrong, 3 flowers is wrong, 4 is wrong. Oh wow, so this question basically only leaves us with one option, which is option 1 over here. However, remember with MCQ questions, it can be very tricky. We want to make sure that this is definitely the answer. So I'm going to check to make sure that the rest U and flowers, these 2 tallies. So when we take a look at it, the leaf generally receives water, and then it makes food which gets transported to the rest of the plant. So that means food usually originates from there. So let's take a look at it. So yes, if you look at the arrow, nothing is which represents food, broken arrow. This tells me that food is being produced in U and is transported to every other part of the plant. So obviously in the leaves, you don't really have food going to the leaves unless the plant is starving. Then only then would your storage root starts to break down back. The starch in your storage root starts to be broken back down into glucose and sucrose, just simpler sugars to be transported to your leaves. But other than that, your leaves will be producing the sugars and it will be transporting it to everywhere else. So yes, I'm very certain that these are my leaves, and the flowers generally receive both food and water, similarly with your fruit. So as you can see, my V is doing that. So that's right, V are my flowers. Sorry for that. So answer number 1. Moving on to question number 15. Okay, right off the top, I can tell you that this has got to do with a question that's got to do with matter and knowing your properties of the 3 states of substances, which is solid, liquid, and gas. Okay, so classic question, they're going to ask you, can it be compressed? Does it have a fixed volume? Does it have a fixed shape? Let's jump right in. So Liam conducted an experiment using a setup below. Capacity of the container is 300 cm cube. The container contains 50 cm cube of water. If Liam continues to pump an additional 150 cm cube of air in the container, how would the volume and mass of the air in the container change? Now, first thing to note, container with capacity of 300 cm cube, it is assumed that this is the amount, okay, this is the volume of substance that this container can hold. It will not change, I stressed. It will not change, it's fixed at 300 cm cube. Now, your container already contains 50 cm cube of water. We know that water has a fixed volume. meaning that it cannot be compressed, it will always be 50 cm cubed. So whatever that is left here in this empty space is occupied by your air. So the question goes on to tell you that he pumps in another 150 cm cube of air, right? But guess what? Here's the thing, okay? Because your water cannot be compressed and your capacity cannot be increased. So if you take 300 minus away 50, you get 250 cm cube. Okay, this is going to be the volume of air that can go in, regardless of how much more air you pump in. This is the maximum volume that it can hold. So therefore, the volume of air, all right, as you know, air can compress, all right, will always increase or decrease or remains the same. The answer is remains the same. So right off the top, we can go ahead and cross out option 1 and 2. And then your mass of air will actually increase. Now, please take note that volume does not equal to mass. They are two very different things. Mass is talking about the amount of substance that makes up an object, an item, okay? Whereas volume is talking about space and an item is occupying. So take for example, if I have got 2 containers, all right? Now, they have both a maximum capacity of 100 cm cube. This is A and this is B. So what happens is that if I'm going to pump in, say, 100 cm cube of air inside container A and 200 cm cube of air into container B, the volume, the final volume, and then I seal it up, of course, the final volume is still going to be 100. However, if we take a look at the particles, okay, I'm just doing a very simple illustration here, you would see that there's twice the amount of particle being packed into container B when you compare to A. So we say that B has a higher mass, because remember I said this, mass deals with the amount of substance that makes up an object. Okay, so for B and A, though they occupy the same volume, which is 100 cm cube, eventually B is going to have a higher mass because there's just more amount of air, all right, making up this inside this container. All right, moving on. 16. Okay, Susan left 2 unopened containers of ice cream, similar size on the table as shown. The 2 containers were made of different materials, A and B. After 30 minutes, she found out that all the ice cream that's in container made of A has melted completely, but not all the ice cream in a container of B has melted. Based on the observation, which of the following statement is true? So right off the top, the idea that comes to me is I know that container A is made out of a material that is a better conductor of heat than B. This is because it allows heat to travel, I'm assuming that the room temperature must be higher than 0 degrees Celsius. I'm assuming that normal room temperature is about 25 degrees. And so what happens is that heat can actually travel from a region of higher temperature, which is in the surrounding, okay, across or to the ice cream. So that means it allows material A actually allows heat to travel faster. So it's actually a better conductor of heat compared to B because the ice cream was partially melted in B. So these are some of the ideas that comes to me right off the top. Now, which of the following statements is true? Let's go down one by one and let's eliminate them because that's the best way to do it. Now, material A and B does not conduct heat at all. That is wrong. That's not correct. If that's the case, then there should be no melting of ice cream at all. This is wrong. Material number 2, material A is a better conductor of heat than B. Yes, this is what I say, so I'm going to put a tick by the side. And just to make sure that the other two is not true, we're going to have to go through them as well. Material B is a better conductor of heat than A. This is wrong, because if that is the truth, then heat will be able to enter the ice cream at a much faster rate. So go ahead and cancel 3. Number 4, material A absorbs more heat from the ice cream than B. Nope, that's wrong too, because remember, heat only travels from a region of higher temperature to a region of lower temperature. In this case, the higher temperature would be from the surrounding air and not the ice cream itself. So therefore, answer 2 is the correct one. Moving on to question 17. Mrs. Tan tried to use an ice cream scoop to scoop out some ice cream for a tub, but found it was very difficult to do so. She then placed the ice cream scoop in a bowl of hot water for 20 seconds. After that, she found it was easier for a scoop to scoop the ice cream out. Now, so for Mrs. Tan method to work, which of the following materials is most suitable for making the ice cream scoop? Answer number 3. Why? Because it is the best conductor of heat out of all the materials here. So which means that when the metal scoop is in the hot water, it actually gains heat very quickly. It will be heated up, and then after that, when she used the same metal scoop to scoop her ice cream, heat will also be able to be transferred to your ice cream very quickly, softening it. Question number 18. Very common question. This question is actually on forces. You'll be surprised, but yes, it's on forces together with magnets. Let's take a look at it. Faizal attached magnet A to a spring as shown. Magnet B is then brought close to magnet A as shown in diagram 2. Why does the spring stretch more in diagram 2? Well, did my magnet A actually increase in mass? No, right? So what happened was that probably this is the unlike poles were facing each other and they got attracted. So let's dive right in to see the option. So it's not frictional force. So let's cross one out. Okay. More gravitational force is acting on A. That's not true. We did not change the mass. So remember, for gravity to change, you have to increase the mass or decrease the mass. In this case, no mass was added or removed from magnet A. So that should not change gravitational force at all. So therefore, number 2 is wrong. Number 3, magnetic force of attraction between A and B pulls magnet A downwards. Yes, that's what I'm saying about. I believe this is the correct one, but I want to check, so I would reason it out why 4 is wrong as well. 4, gravitational force acting on the spring caused an increase in the elastic spring force. That's not true, because once again, mass wasn't changed here, so gravitational force should not be the factor in play. So we cross that out and we have it. Confirm answer number 3. Alright, so this is another example of how elimination method is being used here. Question 19. Okay, Xiaomi wanted to find out if the arrangement of bulbs will affect the brightness of the bulbs. He set up 4 circuits. Which 2 circuits should he compare based on the aim of the experiment? So once again, experimental setup, only one change variable, and the change variable is exactly the factor that you're exploring. So in this case, he's looking at arrangement of bulbs. So the arrangement of bulbs that we have learned, basically there are 2, series versus parallel, right? I hope you know what's series and parallel. So in the series arrangement, basically the components are arranged one after another, okay, hence they're called series. Parallel, the components are arranged parallel to each other, all right, just like how you have 2 parallel lines which never touches each other. Your components are arranged on parallel to each other. So like, you know, if you have a bulb A and then you put a bulb B here, we say that B is parallel to bulb B, and then you put another one which is parallel to bulb C. Okay, which 2 circuits should he compare based on the aim of the experiment? So you need one parallel and one series arrangement. Everything else needs to be the same. So based on this, right off the top, okay, you can either use circuit A, let me see, no, anything with circuit A, we crossed it out, because remember, we said that everything else needs to be the same. Since A is the only circuit arrangement with 1, everything else has 2, we can straight away cross out circuit A, because we are not looking at the different number of bulbs here. So A is out. So anything with A, go ahead and cross it out. Okay, now let's take a look at B, C, and D. Which ones could we use? So remember, it has to be one that is absolutely the same except for the arrangement. So if we look at B and D, this cannot be the case because B has only one battery whereas D has 2. So the answer has to be C and D because C is in parallel arrangement, D is in series arrangement. 2 bulbs, 2 bulbs, 2 batteries, 2 batteries. So there you have it, answer number 4, C and D. Moving on to question number 20. Now, electric circuit was set up as shown in the diagram. P, Q, and R were made of different materials. The batteries and bulbs were working. Only while the bulbs lit up as shown in the diagram above, which of the following about properties PQR is correct. Now, this is actually a question on electrical conductivity. So whether or not a material conducts electricity. All right. So basically, take a look at this, and you find out which ones is a conductor of electricity by tracing the route in which your electric currents flow. So first things first, electric currents always flow from the positive end to the negative end. Just in case you didn't know that, the longer line signifies positive and the shorter line signifies negative. So electric currents would flow from this direction to this direction. Now, it is said that this bulb over here, can we please name it bulb A so that it's easier for me to make reference. Bulb A did not light up. Alright, so only bulb B light up. And how do I know that? Because of the rays over here. It's telling me that it lights up. So, in order for any electric component to work, in this case would be a bulb, there must be a complete circuit for it. So your electric current will run through P, run through Q, and go through it like this. So I'm pretty sure that this is what happened. Now, why didn't A light up? It's because R is an insulator of electricity. Simply because it is insulator electricity, electric currents cannot flow through it, and hence there's a gap. This forms an open circuit. Alright, so because of that, your A is unable to light up. So based on this, I can say that my P and Q, they are actually electrical conductors, whereas my R is actually an insulator. So once again, we can go ahead and use the elimination method. So we know that P is a conductor of electricity. Check option 1, check option 2, cross out option 3 and 4. Therefore, we do not need to look at 3 and 4 at all. Moving on to Q, I know that Q is also a conductor of electricity. So check for option 1, cross for option 2. So this will cross out option 2, leaving me with just option 1. Last but not least, check that R is an insulator of electricity. Correct. So therefore, this confirms my answer is 1. Alright, moving on to question 21. Now the graph below shows the changes in temperature of a beaker of water. The beaker of water was left boiling for 10 minutes and then left on table to cool. After reaching room temperature, ice was added onto the beaker of water. Okay, based on the graph, 4 students made the following statements. Whose statements is or are correct? Let's run through them very quickly. Agnes, there was a change in state from point A to B. I would say that she's correct because it's boiling, right? It's at 100 degrees. It's water. So during boiling, water changes from liquid to gaseous. correct? So there's a change of state, and we have to remember that during change of state, something that's very important, temperature remains constant until all the substance has changed from one state to another state. Okay? Now, so the fact that it did not go any higher, if it continued to boil, just means that not all the water has boiled off. Okay, so Agnes is correct. But no condensation occurred during the experiment. Now, based on this, all right, we can actually say that you're unable to tell. So I'm not going to say yes or no. Definitely there must be some condensation, because water vapor, as long as it's above your melting point, it is actually evaporating. So when it evaporates, water vapor will touch a cooler surface, and then eventually it will actually condense, but somewhere else. But it is not reflected in this graph over here, so you cannot say that. So I'm going to cross out Bob. Okay, Kathy, evaporation only occurred between A and B. That's wrong. Based on my previous statement, evaporation can happen at any temperature above melting point. Okay. DV, between C and D there was no change in temperature. Yes, that's true, because temperature remained constant. Okay, so answer would be I would think it's answer 2, Agnes and DV. Now, I just want to be very clear that whenever they give you a graph, you have to refer to the graph and the experimental conditions or what they were investigating. So even though you have some prior knowledge about something, but if they did not mention it, you cannot use it as part of the evidence. Especially when they give you a graph and they ask you to make reference, you have to assume that you don't really know any factors outside the experiment. Question 22. City observed water droplets forming on the inner window screen of her father's car as shown. Which of the following correctly explains City's observation? Right off the top, I would think that this is a water cycle question. It's condensation. So because if water droplet is forming on the inner side, it means that the windscreen is a cooler surface. So the air inside the car must have a higher temperature than your windscreen. And so that means the outside environment must be really cold. These are some thoughts that run through my mind that should run through your mind as well as you're doing this question. Alright, come, let's go. The first statement says that, okay, the cooler water vapor inside the car condenses on the windscreen. So like I say, no, the air in the car should be warmer. That's what I said, so I know this is wrong. B, the water vapor inside the car gains heat and freezes on the window screen. That's wrong too, because they already told you it's water droplets that's forming, not frost. C, the windscreen outside the car is cooler than the water vapor in the car. Yes, exactly what I said, right? Because your water vapor needs to touch a cooler surface, alright, in order to lose heat. So this is correct. D, the temperature air outside is higher than the temperature of the air outside the car. That's right. That's what I'm saying. Because the air outside is colder, alright, it makes the windscreen colder as well, because the windscreen would lose heat to the outside environment, and that proves that the inside is actually warmer. Inside of the car is warmer because the warm water vapor will touch the cooler surface of your windscreen, lose heat, and condense on it. So this is correct. So answer C and D. Now, let's take a look at question 23. The diagram below shows two similar loads, A and B being released from the same height using parachutes A and B. Although A and B are of the same size, holes has been cut out from parachute A. Okay, so this question, once again, if you've seen it before, shouldn't be surprising to you. It's got to do with air resistance, forces once again. Which load would reach the ground first? Now, we know that basically this is a question on air resistance. Now, the larger the surface area, the larger of air resistance. So B has no holes, therefore air resistance that is acting against it, causing it to be longer in the air, is actually greater compared to parachute A, which has holes. So the holes actually reduce the amount of surface area of the parachute. So because of that, the one that reaches the ground first would actually be load A. So we can go right ahead and cancel anything that says load B. Okay. Now, the reason why is not that because it's experiencing more gravitational force. This is wrong. Remember, I told you that gravity is essentially the same, okay, unless there is a change in mass. So in this case, no change in mass. So the answer is not correct. The answer is actually correct. It experiences lesser air resistance simply because there were holes in it. So there were less surface area. So answer number 2. Moving on to question 24. Okay. The picture shows a burning candle. Which of the following shows the conversion of energy during the burning of a candle? Very, very straightforward. Okay, first things first. Whenever you see candle, whenever you see battery, alright, these two, fuel, it's got to be chemical potential energy. It always starts with that. Okay? Now, what happens next? Then after that, you have your light. Okay, when you light up a candle, you definitely see light. If not, you will not be able to see the candle. It's because the light that's coming up from the flame entering your eyes, that's why you're able to see the flame in the first place. So you know there's light energy. Now, if you have actually experienced touching or going near a fire before, you would know that it's hot. So you know that there is heat energy. So therefore, the answer is very clear-cut. It will be number 3. And no, there's no electrical energy in this case. You do not see sparks flying. And there you have it. 25. James wanted to find out how much rubber band A, B could stretch. He hung weights at the end of each rubber band and measured the length of the rubber band. He plotted the graph below using his results experiment. Which of the following describes the two rubber bands A and B correctly? Once again, these kind of questions, we have to go through one by one and eliminate them. Okay, reason it out. Number 1, the origin length of both rubber bands are the same. Okay, yes, incorrectly. Keyword is incorrectly. Yes, they are the same. How would I know? Because it's at 4 cm. Can you see they both started at 4? So this is correct. This is not the answer. Okay, when 100-gram mass was hung, rubber band B extended by 6 cm. So how do I know? Now, in this case, okay, so at At 100, we know that B is at 10 cm. The original length was at 4 cm. So if we take 10 minus 4, it's actually 6 cm. So this is also correct. So that's not the answer. Let's look at 3. For the same mass, rubber band B stretches more than rubber band A. Okay, now this is not true because if you look at 50, okay, if you look at 50, I'm just going to use a very simple one. At 50, for A, it has reached 10 cm, right? Okay, but for B, it has only reached at about 7 cm right over here. So because if I'm looking at 50, it's somewhere here, just to make it a bit more clear. So as you can see, in actual fact, A actually stretches more than B. Because A, it's over here. I'm changing the color so you can see. It's already at 10 cm when you hang a mass of 50 grams for both. So A actually stretches more than B. So C is actually the incorrect one. But just to check, I'm going to look at 4 as well. For the same mass, rubber band A stretches more than B. Yeah, this is correct. We already saw that. So answer 3. Number 26. The diagram below shows Jenny's playing on a swing. Her dad pushed her to X and let go. She swung to Y and then to Z. Which of the following correctly shows the changes in the amount of kinetic and potential energy as Jenny swings from X to Z? Now this is actually quite a classic question. Now over here we need to first take a look at our key and be very well familiarized with it. So your kinetic energy is a solid line, whereas your potential energy is a broken line. So the question says from X to Z. So we must recognize that your potential energy right at the start is very high. And then after that, it should be, the lowest point should be at Y, and then you'll go up again because there is height. So when we look at all this graph, I'm actually looking at the plausible answer would be 1. Right? Somewhere very high, low, and then go back up again. Okay? And then after that, for my kinetic energy, as from X to Y and then to Z, my Y needs to peak at, my kinetic energy needs to peak at Y, because that's where all the potential energy will be converted to kinetic energy. So this will be my maximum. Okay, and then after that, it then moves, slowly decreases, because kinetic energy will be converted back to potential energy at Z. Okay, so in this case, the answer would be 1. Now, moving on to 27. You have 3 cards out with different shapes as shown in the diagram below. The cards out are placed in a lighted torch in a straight line as shown. The shadow on the screen is shown above. Which of the following shows the correct arrangement of the card out? Now, first things first, we have to understand one thing. They are all the same colors. Same shape. So this question is actually testing you on whether do you know how the size of your shadow would change based on the position of your opaque object in relation to your light and your screen. So basically, generally, the nearer the object is towards your torch, alright, the bigger is the shadow. Alright, so this over here, you can see that because they're the same size, the biggest is actually the circle. So because the biggest is the circle, alright, which is actually Y, we know that Y needs to be at position 1 because it forms the parameter of the shape. It needs to be the biggest. Okay, can you see that it's the biggest? It became the biggest despite all your 3 shapes being the same size. So we can go ahead and cross out anything that's not Y in position 1. Okay, and then we move on to position 2. Now we see that the star is the second biggest object. Right? So the star needs to be bigger than the square. So in this case, we know that your X needs to be in position 2. So therefore, looking at just option 2 and 3, I know that option 3 is correct for X, cannot be the case. So your Z is the smallest, so it should be right at the back at position 3. So yep, there you go. So option number 3. So once again, this is testing you on the position of your object and the size that it will form on the screen. Alright, finally, last question, 28. Now, object C was placed between two objects A and B as shown in the setup below. When object C was pushed towards object A, when object C was pushed towards magnet A, it was observed C started to move to and fro between magnets B and A. Which of the following statements about the observation is incorrect? So right off the top, okay, I am just thinking to myself that when the object is being pushed to this side and then it started going back and forth, I'm thinking that object C is a magnet as well. That's my guess. Because if not the case, then why would it be pushed back and forth? And what happened is that these two are light poles and these two are also light poles. So because of that, they kind of like repel. And so when you push object C towards object A, it will be repelled in this direction. However, when C reaches in this direction, it is repelled again and then it goes back to the other direction and then so on and so forth. Alright, so that's something right off in my mind, right off the top. So, which of the following statements that is made is incorrect, right? So I know that my thing is that I think that object C is a magnet. So I'm going to say that option 1 is correct. So, and then after that, for option 2, W and X are both south poles. Now, this cannot be the case if what I hypothesize is true. Because if this is North Pole, this must be North Pole. And if this is North Pole, then this must be South Pole. And if this is South Pole, this has to be South Pole. Alright, so both X and Y X, W and X cannot be the same poles. One of them have to be a different one, an unlike pole, in order for my hypothesis to work. So therefore, this is wrong. Okay? W can be North Pole, while X can be South Pole. Oh, exactly what I said. So this is correct. Magnetic force of repulsion causes object C to move to and fro from magnets A and B. That's right. Okay, so therefore, the only one that is incorrect is actually option 2. And there you have it. Now, before I end off, I just want to go back to question 27 to talk a little bit more about this and do a little bit of recap, because I would think that most of you would have forgotten this because this is a primary 4 topic. Now, there is a very simple way to help you remember it, to reason it out. To help you do that, what happens is that you would need to draw a straight line. Okay, and on this straight line, you would have a light source. Just put a dot, and then you have a screen, right? So in exam, if you forget this, I think this is like a lifesaver. Now, you then draw 3 different lines with of the same height. So you need to use a ruler. I'm not using a ruler in this case because obviously I'm teaching you. But the key thing about it is put it at 3 different positions. Make sure that they are of equal height. That is the key thing. And after that, use a ruler and draw a point, a line that connects. You know what? Sorry. Can I just redo this too in different colors so that you can see it better? So I have red, purple, and blue. So these 3, same height. Now, join the dot over here corresponding with the color and touch the screen. This is actually your screen. So I'm going to start off with blue. So using a ruler, okay, what you would see is this. So you do that, you repeat the same for all the 3 different colors. Okay, my screen actually needs to be higher for it to work. So what you see is that the red line, all right, is the greatest height. All right, and that is the size of your shadow because it is the nearest to your light source. This is your light source. And this is your screen. So in exam, if you really forget that the nearer the object is to your light, the bigger the shadow form on your screen, you can use this method to actually help you decipher what position will give you a bigger or smaller shadow. Alright, if this works for you, great for you. If it doesn't, then maybe you want to try to remember. Alright, I have come to the end of my tutorial. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you again.